Hi, everybody. Good to have you with us today. We've got a great lineup. Thanks for making us a part of your day. It's bombshell news that's making national headlines. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe's decision to restore voting rights to ex-felons. The move impacts more than 200,000 people just in time for the 2016 election. And as everyone knows, Virginia is likely to be one of a handful of states that could determine who wins the White House. Eben is here, a Democrat. He represents the Alexandria area, part of Arlington, part of Fairfax. Good to have you here, Senator Eben. We reached out to a number of Republicans, including many Northern Virginia lawmakers and the head of the Virginia GOP, but no luck finding someone willing to come in or call in on this topic. Senator, great to have you here.
Thanks to be back. Thanks for having me.
For your time today. Talk about what this means and what it represents in terms of a departure from how the issue of an individual's voting rights, if they've been convicted or pled guilty, served time for a crime, and then come back on the other, sort of at the other side of that process. What is it that Governor McAuliffe has done here to generate such national interest?
Well, on the one hand, it's restoring the rights is a logical progression of what's been done under the last 4 administrations, but restoring the rights of 206,000 individuals is a bold step and an important step. These are people who were disenfranchised, who've paid their debt to society. They're taxpayers, they're in the community, they're working. And the last 4 governors have done similar actions, but only for individuals. The governor has already signed 18,000 individual applications one by one, and the alternative would be to sign 206,000 one by one. We're one of the few states that doesn't automatically restore the rights.
So the process till now has been, if an individual does a crime, does their sentence, and then wants their rights restored, and I guess knows how the process works, they can apply.
Sure.
And then it ends up presumably going through staff and ending up on the governor's desk with an action potentially taken for that person.
That's right.
This is quite different. This is what, an automatic restoration?
Automatic is actually the wrong word.
Okay.
The governor has selected a category, and the category is all those who had been released from their felony obligations, ended supervised probation, and those people have been restored. If you were to be released after committing a felony and paid your debt tomorrow, your rights have not been restored yet. That would have to be another action.
What kind of action?
Presumably another action just like this, where the governor decides to restore the rights of all those who have paid their debt by X date. The process in the past was this petition that was submitted to the Secretary of the Commonwealth that would have to be granted on an individual basis. And this is really a progression of what the last 4 or so governors have done, beginning with Warner. Governor McDonnell made a substantial advance by eliminating the need for an application, or simplifying the application. And this just is further. The Constitution of Virginia allows for this, and the author of the Virginia Constitution and other scholars and the Attorney General have all opined that this is within the limit of the law.
Can you talk about what this means in terms of how Virginia handles this issue of restoring rights for people who've had a criminal conviction and served their time? Where does this put the Commonwealth on the spectrum of how other states handle this same issue?
Well, it moves us closer to most of the other states. We still don't have an automatic restoration, but I think 48 other states or so have an automatic restoration.
Wow.
That once your probation or parole or sentence has been completed, that your rights are allowed. This allows people to vote, serve on a jury, or even run for office.
Phone lines open as we talk with Virginia State Senator Adam Eben. Your reaction to this news, which was page 1 of the New York Times the day after it occurred. It's a big story nationally. It's happening right here in our own backyard, so to speak, and we would love to get your thoughts. So phone lines open. For those of you watching in the 11 a.m. hour, we've posted the number at the bottom of the screen in the hopes that you'll join the conversation here today at 703-387-1020. We'll go to the phones as your calls come in. Again, the restoration of voting rights for ex-felons in Virginia, topic A here on News Talk this time. We'll go to the phones at 703-387-1020 as your calls come in. What sort of reaction is this generating, and what do you say to people who question the timing? We're in the middle of a presidential election cycle. 40 states have voted the same way since 2000. So they're all blue, or, they're blue all the time, or they're red all the time. You've got 10 states in the middle that'll get the lion's share, if you will, of the focus from the candidates, and an even smaller number probably, with Virginia among them, really likely to be the deciders. So is there a cynical part of this? Is there a partisan part of this? Is Terry McAuliffe, a longtime supporter of the Clintons, doing something here to benefit his favored choice in November?
Well, I think that everyone should have the right to participate in the presidential election who's had their rights restored, and I think that that's a good thing about timing. In terms of politics, I think that both parties should compete for these people's votes by appealing to them on issues, whether it's the general issues or issues that might be of concern to them, like the increased funding we should do for restoration and reentry into the community.
But some believe that the universe of voters impacted by this decision is more likely to vote Democrat than Republican. Therefore, this isn't neutral in the sense of, oh, we have a new group of voters. Let's all sort of pursue them and say, vote for me, vote for me. The thinking is, for some, that this is a move that is likely to benefit whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Sure. Well, there's no question it could benefit the Democrats. I will say, though, that you can be a felon in Virginia for doing something as like stealing an iPhone. We have a very low threshold. Now, I would say, should someone who stole an iPhone and paid their debt be able to vote? I think they should. Timing, whatever the timing is, I think they should be able to vote in the next election after they did that. And I know that the applications to vote to have rights restored before the presidential election are accelerating in any event. I've been to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office. I've talked to them about how difficult it is to have the staff to process these 18,000 pieces of paper one by one. And this will make that not necessary for those.
To the phones, line one first. Hello, Sherry. Sherry in Woodbridge, you're on the air. Please, go ahead.
Yes, I just have a question. So when you go to the voter registration office to vote, I see there's a line that says, if you've ever been convicted of a felony, you put yes. So it says, when will your voting rights restored? And you need a date. So will we put the date that the governor signed this into law, or what?
Interesting question.
Yeah,
Thank you,
and
Sherry.
it's an important question because it brings to mind a bill that I passed this session. You do have to check that box, and where it says the date, you put that date in, but as of July 1st, you'll no longer have to because of some legislation I passed. I didn't think the date was necessary.
So that will represent an administrative aspect of this designed to smooth the future.
And I did that before I knew the governor was going to take this action. But for now, people should put in the date.
Can you talk about this year's legislative session and the number of vetoes that we saw from Governor McAuliffe, with your colleagues meeting in the one-day veto session, unable to override him on any of those measures?
Sure. There were about 32 vetoes that the governor made out of about 3,000 bills that were introduced. He told us in the State of the Commonwealth that he would veto anything that made Virginia a less fair state, a less welcoming state, and he did just that. He was not overridden on any of them. More than one-third of each House agreed with his margin. And in the House, it's about a third, all the Democrats. In the Senate, the 19 Democrats voted to sustain his vetoes.
What were the headlines for you from this year's session?
Well,
either in terms of legislation, in terms of what the budget represented, in terms of as an expression of the state's priorities, in terms of the interaction, the interplay between the governor and the assembly.
Sure. In terms of the budget, it's a huge step forward that we're devoting almost $1 billion to education from pre-K to graduate school. More financial aid for college students, increased funding for individual school districts, and even some pre-K money. The money for schools, though, really represents catching up to where we were. We cut back dramatically during the recession on a per-pupil basis, and we're just catching up. The state really has a responsibility, and we're starting to live up to that. In terms of legislation, one notable thing is Go Virginia, a new program for regional business partnerships. to leverage private funds with public funds and get business people involved with deciding this as well with tax incentives. For example, if Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax want to work together on a project, this incentivizes them not to worry about where it's located as long as it benefits the region. We also, in spite of the vetoes, we did get along on the budget at least in the Senate. The House, there was a lot of partisanship, but we got along. There was some an agreement on a firearms deal that the governor brokered. So that was an advance for people who want gun safety.
The presidential candidates are being urged to get on top of and get moving on their vice presidential vetting process now, because in the view of a bipartisan group of experts, it takes about 8 weeks to do it right. And the republic suffers if there's a short-circuited process, a impulsive choice. And so the thinking is, given where we are, that the presidential candidates who haven't started this process need to get going in earnest right now. The New York Times reporting over the weekend that both of Virginia's senators, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, are being considered, or are likely to be considered by Hillary Clinton. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's great. It's great for Virginia, and I do think, maybe I'm biased because I know them both, but I've seen them both serve as governor and serve effectively as U.S. senators, so I think they're great choices. I think Warner brings a budget expertise and an approach of building bipartisanship on the budget, or working for that, that is really needed. I think one of Tim Kaine's advantages is that he really connects with voters across the country. And also in terms of Latino voters, there's a lot of talk about Latino vote. Tim Kaine, it's not just that he's fluent in Spanish, but that he lived in Central America and has a long history with that community as well. I think they'd both serve ably, and I would love to see a choice from Virginia.
Virginia State Senator Adam Eban, a Democrat from the Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax area. Again, we reached out to many Republicans hoping they would join our conversation today, but no luck, unfortunately, for us on that. Senator Eban, thanks for your time. Good to see you as always.
Thank you.
We'll step aside. We'll take a break. We're back, though, with much more news talk right after this.